Hello, everyone. My name is Marcy Taylor, and I want to welcome you. I'm the chair of the Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Stork's Nest. Just a little bit of background. Zeta Phi Beta Sorority and the March of Dimes has a respected and enduring partnership and legacy of addressing issues of prematurity, birth defects, and infant mortality. The March of Dimes has identified November as Prematurity Awareness Month, and the entire month of November, we are offering sessions called Moms Stay Woke, which is conversations with young women about childbirth. And we also want to thank Nurse Family Partnership for partnering with us. Now, this has happened every Wednesday in November at 6 p.m. And we've talked about our first week, we talked about preeclampsia. We had Marshall, who is an NFP certified doula, tell us about preeclampsia. We had Christina on week 2 talk to us about preterm labor. Last week we had Maggie come on talking about the NICU, and then NFP Rochelle, she talked about the ABCs of safe sleep. Today we're going to have our mom, Emily, and I'll be introducing her shortly. She's going to be talking about her experience with preterm labor. We're going to have part 2 with a demonstration of the ABCs of safe sleep, and we're going to be talking about breastfeeding. And our last week, we're going to be talking about support groups and programs. We're going to have Marshall talk about the doula program. We're going to have connecting kids to coverage, and we're going to have tobacco cessation. All of those are going to be talked about next week. Now, for our moms, if you attend at least 4 of the sessions, you will be entered into a drawing for some swag. There's NFP swag, there's a self-care kit, there's $20 in gift cards to Generations Adventureplex, a gift card for a manicure at Nailed by D, and a $100 gift card to Therapeutic Indulgence. Now we're going to be doing that drawing next week after next week's session. Next, we're just going to ask everyone to go around and introduce yourselves. So we'll just go ahead with Rochelle.
I'll go ahead and start. So I am Rochelle. I'm the nurse supervisor for Nurse Family Partnership that covers St. Joe, LaPorte, and Elkhart counties.
Thank you, Rochelle. Carrie?
I am Carrie. I am one of the nurse home visitors, and I see clients in Elkhart County mostly, and I have a couple over in St. Joe.
Thank you. Alice?
Good evening. My name is Alice Williams, and I'm a current president of the local chapter of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. Thank you for joining us tonight on this Thanksgiving Eve.
Kaylee?
I'm Kaylee. I'm one with the twins, 27 weeks, 1 day now.
Awesome. And Tamara?
Hello, I am Tamara. I am a first-time mother, and I am 38 weeks today.
Awesome. We want to thank everyone for coming in on our session today. And now we're just going to introduce our speaker, Emily. Emily, go right ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate the time, the opportunity to come and share with you. I was a first-time mom recently, not too recently. My daughter is now 18 months old, but I just wanted to share briefly my experience of the premature birth and the premature labor. So I was a high-risk mom. I had both high blood pressure, I had gestational diabetes, and because of my age, I had a good care team that were looking after me to try and make sure that all these things were being managed. So as the pregnancy progressed, my appointments also increased just to make sure that everything was still in check. And it got to the point around about 30 weeks, I was having ultrasounds maybe every twice a week, just to check on the baby's movement and so on and so forth. And on one of those appointments, I went in, and I think the baby's movements were a little bit slower than they wanted. My blood pressure was a little bit higher than they liked, so they sent me to the hospital to have that monitored a little bit closely. When I got to the hospital, they found that yes, indeed, the baby, she was okay. Her movements over time, I think maybe, she just had times when she was sleepy or whatever the case may have been, but her movements improved while I was there, but my blood pressure remained high. And when they did some blood work, they found that my kidney function seems to be deteriorating. So they requested to keep me in at least for the night, just to see if I was dehydrated or what the issues were. Long story short, I ended up being in hospital for about 3 weeks. So from 30 weeks through to 33 weeks, I ended up being on full bed rest just while they continued to monitor my condition. But cut to the end, to the final week, my baby was born at about 34 weeks. And my stay in hospital, my condition pretty much stayed the same, but I think I was at peace with the amount of that I was in the right place and with the monitoring that I was getting, just to continue to reassure me that both the baby's development and my health were a priority, and that both were being monitored while I was there. But towards the end of my 33rd week, we found that my kidney function seemed to be deteriorating even worse. My blood pressure was not really being controlled with the medication that I was on. And that is when my doctor started, talking about inducing me for me to go into early labor, just to make sure that they didn't want to wait until my condition worsened to the point where everything was now an emergency. They preferred for us to be in control of the situation and for them to be able to handle it better, and also just to make sure that they were both looking after my health and the baby's health, and they just didn't want everything to be an emergency for us to be running around trying to figure things out at the last minute. So at about the end of 33 weeks, coming into 34 weeks, we agreed to be induced, and I was given all the different options of what was available. They started with the Pitocin injections, and that didn't do much over a period of a day or a couple of days. I think if I remember rightly, I was getting the injection, I think every 12 hours. And I may be misspeaking. It's been a few months since, but over that time, I only dilated up to 2 centimeters over a period of 3 days with all the things that they were trying to do. At that point, again, my doctor suggested, it was up to my husband and I to decide if we wanted to carry on with trying to be induced. Considering the slow progress that we had made, they could guesstimate that over the next 3 days I could be dilated another 2 centimeters. There was no guarantee that if they continued to try to induce the labor that anything was going to happen any faster. And that experience of being induced, for me, it wasn't a harrowing experience. There's a lot of discomfort with all the checks that they make, and with all the just the process itself was uncomfortable. I can't say that I ever went into full labor during that time. I could feel the contractions, but they were very mild. It wasn't anything that was too painful from my experience. But so after the 3rd day, my doctor suggested that I should consider having a C-section, which throughout my pregnancy, it was something that had been suggested anyway, just because we knew that it was an expectation that I wasn't going to go into full-time my pregnancy wasn't going to be a full-time pregnancy, just with the challenges that I had. And again, having a C-section is something that had also been discussed. So at this time, we talked with my husband and we agreed that, we didn't want to have the risk of continuing to induce the labor. And the other thing that they noticed, that every time I was given an injection of Pitocin, the baby's heart rate plummeted, and you could see that the baby was in distress. So it wasn't really a viable option for us to carry on in that manner. So we multiple discussions, and we agreed to go through the C-section and have the baby early. With the one conversation I remember having, it was on a Monday morning, and the doctor, she'd given us what our options are. And, we said, okay, so if we're to have the C-section, when would you like to schedule it? And I expected her to say, maybe we can do it on Friday or, Thursday or something like that. And she said, well, I'm free now. And that was a bit of a shock to me that, she was ready that quickly to get the baby out. But anyway, we agreed to have the C-section that afternoon. And I think it was more for my husband and I, for our peace of mind, It was during COVID, so we couldn't have family around. And, for the most part, we had been unprepared for things to happen that quickly and for the baby to be delivered that quickly. But, that afternoon, I went in for the C-section. Everything went according to plan. Less than an hour, the baby was delivered. She, again, these are things that I can say that I had been prepared for, that she may have breathing difficulties. And they also needed to keep a close eye on her feeding and how she was going to manage with that. So I had been warned that if at delivery the baby's seems to be having difficulty breathing, I may not be allowed to have skin-to-skin contact immediately. They may have to whisk her away to make sure that they attend to her. And in our case, that's what happened, that she seemed to have been having challenges. So they took her straight to NICU and they started working on her. My husband followed through with them. I was put through into recovery. And a few hours later, I was able to also go down and see her and spend time with her. And by then, she seemed to be back in control. And whatever the issue she had with breathing, it was no longer a problem. All in all, through my hospital stay, I have to say, some of the things that I really appreciated, I had a chance to go and visit the NICU because, again, I had been prepared that being in hospital, my circumstances could change at any time. So I needed to be prepared of what having a preterm child would mean. So I had met with multiple NICU doctors who they were always readily available to come and speak with me and let me know, to answer any questions. So they had explained some, so the challenges that generally what they, the things that they're trying to take care of and just for me to familiarize myself with the facility, with the nurses and the doctors there. I by the time that the baby was going into NICU and we were going through that experience of her being born early and all the challenges that could have been expected, I was prepared in that they had talked us through it multiple times. Multiple doctors had come in and told me what my options are and what could likely happen, the best case and the worst case, of what the first of all, what the delivery would look like, what her first few hours, days would look like, and so on and so forth. She ended up being in NICU for just a couple of weeks, which we had thought that it might be longer, but she did really well. She recovered really quickly. She bounced back, and we're able to go home within 2 weeks of her delivery. She, again, the other thing, my with her staying in NICU, I was also able to stay at the hospital in a room close by, not necessarily in the NICU room with her, but in a room close by. So things like breastfeeding, I was able to continue to, breastfeed her from the beginning every 3 hours. And, just having a team there that would be able to guide and to answer questions. The doctors, whenever they did their rounds, we made sure that we were available to answer any questions, to hear what the nurses are saying about her development, what they're sharing about, what her day has been and, how she was progressing in her day-to-day care. So I felt that throughout this process of her being born early and her staying in the hospital, that we were well informed with what was happening with her and whether they needed to make adjustments with her care or my care, that we were well informed, in advance. And yeah, since then, she's doing well. She's come home and she's just grown and grown and grown. And she's still growing. She's doing really well. She's met all the milestones that she should be meeting. She's a healthy baby, and that's something that I'm thankful for. That the initial care that I had to bring her into this world was very solid. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that story, Emily. And I'm glad your baby girl, right?
Yes.
I'm glad she's doing well and achieving all her milestones. Does anyone have any questions?
I just have a quick comment. It sounds like you had such a wonderful care team, and I'm so happy to hear that you had what sounds to be a very positive experience despite the challenges that you faced.
Yeah, I did. I was very thankful that, the doctors, I'll call them my high risk doctors. They worked really closely with my OBGYN to make sure that, whether it was my glucose numbers or my blood sugar numbers, my diet was really being closely monitored. And, I also have to commend the NFP moms that, the nurses that Nurse Peg, she's awesome. She checked on me regularly. She, whenever I had an issue, she was always very quick to recommend either somebody I can talk to or a resource that I can find that would be helpful. I was at the time I was very new to India, and I'd only been here a couple of months, so I didn't have my usual support network. I didn't know many people in town, so having the nurses and people that I could call at the blink of an eye just to ask a question, or if I was concerned, is this something that I can, go to bed and sleep it off, or do I need to go and call my doctor and have it checked out? Just having the comfort of having people around me that I could ask those questions was very comforting.
As the supervisor, I love to hear that.
Thank you. Thank you.
That is great. Do we have any questions from the moms on the call, on the Zoom? None? Okay.
I missed her name, Emily. What's her name?
Eliana.
Eliana.
Eliana's her name.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so if there's no questions for Emily, we are going to move on. We're going to have part 2 of the ABCs of safe sleep. Now, Nurse Rochelle is going to give us a demonstration that she talked about last week about with the baby, I believe.
Yep. So it looks kind of weird, and I'm trying to have a baby in a bag in my house here, and I might actually turn off my background filter because it makes it really hard to see. Okay, there we go. It just, if you're not human in the picture, it blurs it. So it's really kind of difficult. So, oops. Okay, so this is our baby. It's pretty heavy, kind of lifelike. It's actually made out of like a silicone rubber kind of material. But like I talked about last week, it actually, and this is weird, but it actually comes apart. So you can see the inside. So this is like the back of the throat. Oops, sorry, my lungs and everything just fell out. So this is a piece that's 3D printed. So you've got the lungs, you've got the stomach, the trachea, and the esophagus. So this side, the esophagus, is towards the back. And so when you put baby on their back to sleep, and I'm just going to use this piece because it makes it easier to try and hold it and demonstrate at the same time. So when your baby's on your back to sleep, you can see how the fluid may come up that esophagus a little bit, but it's not going to come up and go into the lungs. If you turn that baby, let's see, I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this. If you turn baby even on its side, see how it automatically like came up and went into the lungs a little bit? Now, if you turn that baby all the way on its stomach, it's going to do the same thing. It's going right up and into those lungs. Doesn't mean it's going to happen to every baby, but the risk is greater if you're side or tummy sleeping. So that's our demonstration with our baby. And we just recently got this baby. So our nurses have not had the chance to use it yet because we got to get a sign out available. But any questions on like the back to sleep? I love this because it gives a visual, which I think really solidifies things for a lot of people.
Okay, and then the ABCs once again is because I don't
alone.
think it was on last week.
Yep, that's okay. A is alone. B is on the back. And C is in the crib or pack and play. So alone, on their back, and in their own safe sleep space. Oh, Tamara fell off of there. All right.
So thank you for that demonstration.
You are welcome.
Elise says she loves the baby.
We do too. We actually got it through, I'm drawing a blank. What's the big hospital system in Fort Wayne, Carrie? I can't hear you. You're muted.
It's either Parkview or Lutheran.
I want to say it was Parkview. They had a
Probably.
team that was starting to work on these safe sleep babies right when COVID hit. And so like we're just now getting them. But yeah, there's actually a computer portion that goes with it and you can pick different sleep scenarios, but we don't have that available quite yet. So, but it'll show like, okay, if baby is sleeping alone on their back, you know, ABCs of safe sleep, nothing else in the crib, their oxygen level will stay right where it's supposed to, around, 99 to 100%. And then as you add in risk factors that could increase the risk of SIDS, so maybe mom was a smoker, or maybe there was drug use, or maybe they are co-sleeping. Maybe baby's sleeping in a crib or in a swing, or a car seat, or they've got pillows and blankets or stuffed animals. All those different variables do different things to that oxygen level, and so it gives another visual of how just co-sleeping increases your baby's risk of that oxygen level dipping. And then the other one, like the more risk factors you put on there. So say you have a mom or even dad, like if they're smoking in the house in general. So you're co-sleeping, you have a smoker in the house, all these factors, then that heart or that oxygen level will drop even quicker and lower. So just another very good visual of, why it's best for babies to sleep alone on their back and in their own safe sleep space.
I think that's great. I mean, that's awesome that they're coming up with technology ways for people to actually visualize and see what could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. All right. The last thing we have for this evening is some information on breastfeeding. So I actually wanted to start with, what are your guys' feeding plans? So I got Tamara and Kaylee, who are still pregnant. So what have you guys thought about what your feeding plans are?
Currently, me personally, I want to breastfeed, and then I'm also going to bottle feed, just so the father can be able to assist me with that.
Okay.
But yes, I primarily plan to pump the entire time. That's my goal.
Well, I applaud you for that, because pumping is a challenge in itself. But
I know.
I've seen a couple of different moms in my time with NFP that have pumped for that whole first year and done a beautiful job with it. So
yes,
and I know
that's my goal.
You've got a great nurse and your doula on board with you too that can help support those goals. So Kaylee,
Yes.
what are your feeding goals?
If I can't breastfeed, it'll be bottle feed or pump.
Okay. All
But
right.
as of now, it kind of just depends
Yeah,
on
absolutely.
how
And
things turn out, how things go. So
yeah, absolutely. And you also have an amazing nurse to help support you in whatever challenges you may face with any type of feeding. So what have you guys heard about breastfeeding? What would be concerns that you might have about breastfeeding?
My concern would just be,
soreness.
sorry.
Just soreness for me, soreness and them latching, I guess.
Yes, mine would be the crackling of the nipple, sore nipples, and then the latching also.
Okay. So latch can definitely be a challenge. Most of our nurses are lactation consultant or lactation specialists, I should say, not consultants. And so they do have that extra education in lactation. But yeah, definitely latch is a big one. Try to meet with the lactation consultant at the hospital if they have one readily available. If you receive WIC, they also have peer counselors and lactation consultants that can meet with you. But I do have a demonstration here for latch. And it's, don't mind me because this puppet is horrible to try and control, but this is my baby. And then we have a breast. So you're gonna kind of, to start, you'll kind of tickle the lip until baby opens nice and wide. And you wanna get that baby on nice and symmetrical. So you've got the same amount above and below the nipple. And the areola. You want baby to have as much of this areola in the mouth as possible. Because if they latch just on, oh, and I can't get my puppet going again here, but if they latch just on the nipple itself, so the tip of the nipple, that's when you get the cracking and bleeding that both Kaylee and Tamara had mentioned. If baby gets a nice deep latch, then you may have a little bit of tenderness when baby first latches on, but breastfeeding shouldn't be painful. It's when they're not latching right, they're getting a very shallow latch that you end up with those sore nipples. So definitely utilize any resources you can to help with breastfeeding. Talk with your nurses, talk with your doula, Tamara, talk with the nurses in the hospital, the lactation consultant in the hospital. Latch is something that can be fixed. It takes work. It's not easy, but latch is definitely something that can be fixed to help avoid those sore, cracked nipples. If you do get cracked nipples or sore nipples, a lot of the hospitals will give you lanolin cream, which works, but really they found that the best thing is actually coconut oil. It's really good for your skin and your nipples. And it's safe for baby. Moving on, what have you guys heard about milk production and maybe like how much your baby's going to take early on?
Not a lot.
I'm in the first time. Yeah, I was going to say, sorry. I'm in the first time mothers group. And they said, as far as like production of the milk, sometimes it doesn't even happen until a few days after birth. And then they stated maybe like a few ounces would be like maybe 2 to 3 possibly, depending. Everyone is different, but at most that's what they've been seeing on average.
That's awesome. So I heard you say that you had heard that milk production doesn't always happen right away. That is a misconception because women have colostrum at birth, and even though it's got a different name, that is the first milk. It comes in very, very small amounts. It's a very thick yellow substance. It's extremely high in protein and immunities. So your baby needs very little of it to get full. Honestly, about a teaspoon is all they need to start. So the first day after birth, and I don't know how well you can see this, but this little circle, it's about the size of a cherry. That's how big baby's tummy is to start. And so you can see why you only need a teeny tiny amount of liquid to fill them up. So as we progress, and actually that's the same color of their stool. So the first stool is called meconium. It's a very thick, black, tarry substance. And over about a day to 2 days, that transitions. And you end up with this green colored stool. And baby's tummy has gotten a little bigger. This is by about day 3. So they go from about 6 mLs, which is a little bit more than a teaspoon that they could take on days 1 through 3. By day 3, we're up to about 25 to 26 mLs. So not quite a full ounce. So to put it in perspective, 30 milliliters is 1 ounce of liquid. So that's all your baby's tummy can handle. And so if they're taking, if you're feeding formula or even pumping and feeding breast milk out of a bottle, and they're taking more than that, and all of a sudden they spit up quite a lot, it's because they've overfilled their little tummies. Then by about day 10, their stool is kind of this yellowy color. If they're breastfed, it's going to be kind of seedy. And they can take about 2 ounces. So about 60 milliliters by about day 10 of life. Any questions so far? Okay. So breastfed babies, we're not going to actually measure how much they're taking, but early introduction of breastfeeding, so early and often is what we say. The earlier you introduce the baby to the breast and the more frequently you feed, in theory, the better your milk supply should be. When there's a delay, then that can delay how quickly your milk comes in, as well as how much you produce. Now, other things that can affect that is you want to make sure you're drinking plenty of water. That's the basis of breast milk. Breast milk is 88% water, which helps to keep our babies hydrated. It's only 12% other stuff, so fats, sugars, vitamins. So you really want to make sure that you're drinking plenty of water. You want to limit your caffeine intake. So coffee, teas, pop, because caffeine is a diuretic. It pulls fluid from everywhere in our bodies, and it's going to make you pee it out. And so it's also going to decrease your milk supply. So I always tell my mamas a cup of coffee, a soda, but not, a 2 liter a day, a pot of coffee a day. You really want to, in moderation, just like anything in life, it's okay in moderation. Let's see, what else can I tell you?
How long should you, if you plan on breastfeeding, I know they both said they're going to breastfeed and bottle feed, but how long should you actually breastfeed a baby?
So any amount of breastfeeding is amazing. Like, it's all going to have benefits for your baby. My biggest thing is decide what your goal is, and then have somebody, hold you accountable and try to work towards that goal. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends breastfeeding. Actually, this recommendation just changed. It's now up to 2 years. It used to just be a year, but just within the last, I want to say 6 months, they changed it to 2 years. But again, any amount of breast milk that your baby gets is going to be beneficial for them. It's going to help with ear infections and allergies, and help them to not get sick as frequently. What else? It's got good benefits for mom too. So moms that breastfeed have lower rates of uterine cancer and breast cancer. They have less risk of diabetes later in life. Unless, of course, like Emily and myself, you have gestational diabetes in pregnancy, then unfortunately that puts you at a higher risk for developing diabetes later on. But amazing benefits for mom and baby. What else? Any questions so far, Kaylee? I see Tamara fell off the call again.
So I have another question. So if they're pumping, what's the proper storage? How long should they store it?
Those are great questions that I always defer to. The milk storage bags have a good chart on there. Let me see if I can find one real quick that I could screen share. So if you're pumping, you always want to make sure that you are cleaning and sanitizing your pumping equipment. They do make really great bags that you just put a little bit of water in the bottom. You put your breast pump parts, once they've been cleaned, in the bag, and you pop it in the microwave, and that sanitizes them. It's so nice. And each bag, I think you can use up to like 20 times. So it's not like a one and done kind of thing. Let me see.
I gotta go. My food just got done, so I will see you guys next Wednesday.
Okay,
All right.
you.
Thanks for joining,
Thanksgiving.
Kaylee.
You're welcome. Bye.
Okay. Oh, I did find a chart, and of course it's teeny tiny. It varies. So in the refrigerator, typically max of 48 to 72 hours. In the freezer, like just a regular freezer attached to your refrigerator, 3 months. And if it's in a deep freeze, up to a year. But I always tell my moms that when you buy milk storage bags, there's usually a chart in there that gives you the ideal amount of time, and then like a max amount of time that you can keep it, not even just in the refrigerator or freezer or deep freeze, but also at room temperature.
Okay.
So room temperature is usually not more than an hour or two.
Great, thanks. Now I have one more question. Does anyone else have any questions? Tamara, do you have any questions? Okay, well,
No,
I'm sorry. You say
no,
no?
ma'am.
Okay. So what are some other common breastfeeding problems or issues? You mentioned like latching on and sore nipples. What else might a mom experience?
So one thing that a lot of people don't hear about before they deliver and are breastfeeding a baby is cluster feeding. And cluster feeding is exactly what it sounds like. That baby wants to eat. Like they just finished and, oh, guess what? I want to eat again. And I finished and mom, guess what? I want to eat again. So you literally feel like you're feeding constantly. Typically that happens when baby's going through a growth spurt. And so it's really important for mom to understand that this isn't going to last forever. Baby's doing this for a reason. It's to bring in that, to increase that milk supply. The first time it happens is really kind of scary and overwhelming, just because it happens on night 2 of life. So there is, they call it second night syndrome. And the theory is that, because after baby's born, they kind of sleep a lot during that first 24 hours. And we all know babies sleep a lot anyway, but that first 24 hours after delivery, they've just been through a shocking experience. They came into this cold, bright world that is way different than mom's womb, that was nice and comforting and warm and snuggly. And so they sleep a lot during that first 24 hours. And then they hit that second night and they want to feed constantly. They don't want to be put down. They're more alert and awake. And just, so mom knowing that this isn't going to last. It's okay. It will get better. the first 2 weeks of breastfeeding tend to be the most challenging because it's new for you, it's new for your baby, and you both have to kind of get used to each other and try to learn this new routine, new task that neither of you has ever done before. So there are some challenges, but it can be very, very rewarding. The other thing that we had mentioned, Marcy, does anybody have any questions about that? Sorry, I keep moving right ahead.
Okay, I do. I want to ask Emily what her experience was like breastfeeding, and if she's still breastfeeding.
No, I'm no longer breastfeeding, but I have to say I really enjoyed it. It was a time to bond with the baby, and I had a little bit of a delayed start just because of the C-section, and by the time I woke up from the meds, I was I was a little bit later than the lactation consultant wanted,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't really change anything. Just as you said about the first breast milk, I remember even before we went into delivery, I was told about it being liquid gold, that even if it was a smear, they wanted to make sure that it got to the baby, and she was able to take that. So I think I breastfed her for about 8 months, 9 months. And then when I got back to work is when it got challenging pumping at work, and maintaining that. I think that's where my challenge came in. But for the 2 weeks while I was in hospital, outside of her, because she was tube fed for a lot of that time, but as much as possible, I was able to breastfeed her, and I was definitely able to pump throughout. When I came home, again, it was a mixture of both, and then I was able to pump for my husband and my mom, who was helping with the baby, to be able to help to feed her, so that I could get some rest. One of the challenges that I had was to have, when your breasts are fully engorged, and they're really full with milk, and to also have blocked ducts. But again, I those are things that they were brief. It wasn't things that really stopped me from breastfeeding. The one recommendation that I give to anybody who's going to stop by and listen, for the 2 weeks that she was in NICU, I used the hospital pump that's the pump that I used. And that thing is just awesome. It's like in 10 minutes, everything is empty. And then you come home and you have these pumps that take a lot longer to pump and so for me, that got frustrating. And I found that while I was in hospital, I was able to produce so much more milk than I was doing at home. And when I reached out to the lactation consultant at the hospital, they actually have them available for you to take them out on loan. So, and for me, it was affordable. And the benefit of me having that, especially as I started going back to work, it's huge and bulky, and it's not easy to it's not very portable. It's not easy to take around with you. But, whenever I had it and whenever I made use of it, I found it very useful for me to have that hospital grade pump as opposed to the ones that I had at home. And I think that for me, that was the game changer that allowed me to breastfeed and pump, a lot longer than I was ready to give up within the first few weeks of being at home, just because of the frustration of it wasn't pumping as much, or it wasn't pumping as quickly. And it just felt a lot more cumbersome when I was at home. And maybe, when I was in hospital, I had a whole team of people around me cheering me on every time I pulled out the breast pump. So that made it, made it a little easier. But, for me, I recommend if it's available and if it's affordable, even if it's for a few weeks, the difference that made for me was huge.
Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. There are so many different pumps on the market. The hospital grade pumps obviously are the best. That's what they're made for. But, I always recommend talk to people that have breastfed in the past, that have pumped, and find out what they used, what they liked, what they didn't like. I worked with a nurse who had used a Medela pump, a nice Medela double electric, and she had also used a Spectra. and she much preferred her Spectra pump. I've got 4 kids. I've used, with my first 2, nobody ever talked to me about pumping. With the last 2, I had a nice Medela electric pump that I liked. But then with my last one, I was able to afford a nice, totally hands-free, cords-free, tube-free, no nothing. Oh, what was it? It wasn't the Willow. It's another one that's similar, but it just fits in your bra. It's so super quiet. And that one actually worked really well as well. So just, talking to people that and finding out what they liked, what they didn't like, if there was something they didn't like, why didn't they like it? You mentioned engorgement, which unfortunately sometimes is unavoidable, but if we're feeding frequently and pumping frequently, you should hopefully not have to deal with that. Some people are just mass producers when it comes to making milk for their babies, and it's unavoidable. So just, making sure we're feeding baby frequently, watching for those feeding cues. So some different feeding cues, early feeding cues. So maybe baby was sleeping, but now, he or she's starting to stir around. They're bringing their hands to their mouth or the face, making light sucking motions, rooting. So kind of turning the head, looking for the breast, extending the tongue. So, when they look like they're just kind of sticking their tongue out, going, that's an early sign of that they're hungry. What else? Making some light sounds. So, they're just kind of starting to grunt in their sleep a little bit. Those are all early signs that baby's hungry. And if you catch them at that point, they're going to eat much easier for you than if you wait until they're showing some later signs like crying. If your baby gets to the point of crying, they're now far beyond being, hungry. And you now have a frustrated baby who has to calm down before they're going to even want to try to latch to eat. What else? Any other questions?
I guess there's none. Tamara, do you have any questions?
No, ma'am, I don't have any questions.
Okay, great. Well, with that being said, I don't have anything else. Do you have anything else, Rochelle?
No, Marcy, breastfeeding is such a huge topic, and I am so passionate about it. I could talk for 3 days.
Well, we'll have to make sure next we include that as one of our talking, spend more time on that. Emily, I want to thank you for taking the time out to share the story. I'm so glad, things progressed and your baby girl is doing great. And just thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I want to thank Rochelle and Carrie and everyone else. Just reminding you, next week is our last week. We're going to be talking about support and programs. If you attended 4 or more sessions, you're going to be entered into that swag basket. And if you happen to miss a session or you want to review a session, they are on our YouTube channel, South Bend Zetas. So with that being said, if there's no questions, I want to thank everyone and have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Bye-bye.